Well, I am so excited to be moderating this panel with these two esteemed and august space leaders, global space leaders. This discussion is going to be truly exciting and enlightening. And I will start by asking Karla to introduce herself briefly, and then we'll go to Zolana.
Great. My name is Karla Smith-Jackson, and I am the Senior Procurement Executive at NASA headquarters. I'm also the Deputy Chief Acquisition Officer to the Deputy Administrator of the agency, who's Pam Melroy. Thank you.
Thank you, Karla. It's so great to have you.
Good to
Zolana?
Yes. Hi, Camille. Hi, Karla.
Hello.
First of all, thanking Kate Moore to putting this together. Amazing and impressive. I am Zolana. I'm the head of the Angolan Space Program. I've been doing space for the last 15 years. I'm also working with Arusha Space as one of the leading consultants. I'm currently the chair of the International Satellite Organization for Africa, for more than 45 countries, where we're trying to push connectivity in the continent, and I'll dive more as we progress here. I love space. This is what I do every day, and I'll be delighted to contribute here with discussions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think that's what we have in common. We are all space geeks, right? Really,
Right.
I mean, spend our careers in the space domain. So I will start with Karla. And my first question to you is, can you talk about briefly about NASA's missions and its priorities?
Absolutely. So NASA actually stands for the National National Aerospace and Space and Aviation. So the first A is Aeronautics, and I want to start with the first A in NASA, which is Aeronautics. A lot of folks think that we're solely focused on space, but we do quite a bit in the aeronautics area, and some of our goals there are to do sustainability. So things like coming up with what we call single or sustainable flight. And those are like single aisle aircraft that could transform the way that we do fly from one place to another. Other things are to be able to have a low boom or silent boom aircraft to get us and break the speed of sound without a big boom. So there's a low boom flight demonstrator that we're working on. And then there's any number of other what we call flight opportunities that we have multiple awards to be able to transform how we do aviation and flight. So one of the things also in that area we're exploring are what we call aviation or air taxis, and a lot of things to be able to deconflict or kind of get rid of the congestion and some of the things going on in the environment in that space. The other area a lot of folks aren't familiar with are the area of science. We have, in fact, that's our second largest spend area. We recently had the Europa Clipper that was launched to be able to go and study. That was really exciting. That was a long time coming. Our James Webb Space Telescope, which went up about almost 2 years ago. Christmas will be 2 years ago, and we've had any number of now visual pictures that have come back to look at in the past what was happening in space. But then we also do have work that we do with respect to climate and agriculture. We have a couple of things that we do with NOAA, which is I'm drawing a blank, but basically the oceans and how we're doing with oceans and cooperating with satellites.
Alexa, pause.
Yes, thanks. And then also we do a lot of things with agriculture, looking at the mapping of countries and what's happening with our satellites and things there. So we have a large FFRDC, and that's the Jet Propulsion Laboratory out of California and Pasadena, Caltech. They've largely been championing this area of research in Mars. And so a lot of you saw some of our Mars work a few years back where we had a rover and Perseverance and a little helicopter, and we did get Mars samples. So those samples were recovered and placed on the surface of Mars. And so right now we're talking about how do we go back and send some aircraft or some spacecraft back to recover those samples, and that's called Mars Sample Return. We've recently had some initiatives with respect to shortcomings in budget, so that program is currently being revamped. And then that brings us to what most people know NASA for, which is space exploration systems, as well as space operations. So when you're talking about space operations, those are things like the ISS, which I know Camille was intimately involved in when she was with NASA. And we're now involved in what we call the deorbiting of the ISS, which will be around the 2030 timeframe. So we had a recent contract award for that. And when you start to think about space exploration, we have low Earth orbit as well as your deep space. And so in the low Earth orbit area, we have spacesuits that we're currently flying for ISS. And we awarded a contract. Actually, Rockwell Collins has that for improving those spacesuits. But then we also need a lunar spacesuit, deep space spacesuit for when we go back to the moon and to Mars. And so Axiom, which we're really excited, is a small woman-owned business, did win that award. They're teaming with Prada, so that's a really interesting kind of grouping or partnership. And so you've seen some things in the news about that. But then we have all the other components of Artemis. It might be our space launch system that Boeing manages, Orion, which is the space capsule. And then a lot of folks have seen our human landing systems. So we have two of those that are kind of in a leader-follower, one with SpaceX and one with Blue Origin, because after we get up into orbit, we've got to absolutely get our human beings into the lander to land on the surface of the moon and Mars. So to that end, and I'm going to wrap this up, we also recently made a contract award for a lunar terrain vehicle, which is the old-fashioned space buggy. But what's really interesting this year is we have multiple awards, or this phase, we have 3 awards. And I saw somebody said about teaming. What's really interesting is we're teaming with commercial contractors as well as small businesses. And this is not just or it's not intended to be a vehicle just for mobility on the moon, but it's also a research vehicle. So where we'll be on the moon, we anticipate to be there 1 week a month. The other 51 weeks of the year, we expect to do space experiments. So it'll be controlled remotely. And just really some really exciting experiments that we'll be doing as a pathfinder to get us to be able to live and work on the moon and then ultimately Mars. So that's kind of just a quick synopsis of some of the things we're doing at NASA.
Oh my gosh, all of which are familiar to me. Just so exciting. And so many opportunities coming up for partnerships between NASA and small, large companies in terms of the Artemis missions. Just really, really exciting. And I'm so really delighted to hear about all the whole portfolio, Karla. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Zolana, going to you. You have built the Angolan Space Office into the 4th largest space program on the continent of Africa. Can you talk to us about why Angola felt it was important to have a space program?
Yes, Camille, this is a great question, something that I really like to share my perspective with the world. But first of all, just to congratulate you, Karla and NASA for the leading space in the world, and Camille, right? So, we are fortunate to be among the only 3 African countries who have signed the Artemis Accord, recognizing the importance of this mission. Yes, 15 years ago, the Angolan government said, listen, we need to get into space. Angola was not doing nothing in space, zero. The main problem that took us to space and we're trying to solve, and this is what I want to hold on, I think space is important today that you build based on a problem that you need to solve, a specific, and was connectivity. Over 60% of Africans out of 1.4 billion, they don't have access to internet as we speak today. Can you believe it? So meaning that regardless what we discuss in terms of digital transformation or digital services that they want to deliver to people, they won't be able to tap it because unfortunately this is a huge problem. And our government back then said, Zolana, let's please, and I was fortunate to be there from the scratch. Nothing says, Zolana, like to have a strategy or now after 10 years, Angola will be one of the leading countries in the continent solving this problem. And this is how we started with the strategy, which was very clear. And we wanted to do 4 pillars. The first one is building infrastructures made for connectivity to connect Angola and the continent. Second is capacity building. We didn't have any resource of any kind for the different areas that we want to involve. It was a massive work. We trained more than 70 specialists today, PhDs, masters, bachelors, not just from academic perspective, but with the industry experience, be able to do technical review, acceptance, procurement of different type of satellites. And then on third, we had to look at how we involve the space industry in Angola. So we were trying to see, okay, what are type of regulations, what are type of investments that will need to come to the country, and technology to help our industry. Fourth, cooperation. We wanted really to see, we said, listen, we cannot do space without cooperation. The example of signing the Artemis Accord is a clear example that government back then was saying, hey, we need someday sit on the table to discuss space exploration. For instance, that was one of the strategy. And other really make partnership with strong companies in the world to build satellites, right? I always say to my guys, to my team is, if you want to be smarter, you have to work with the smarter guys in the room, right? Mm-hmm. So we partner with some of the biggest space industry, like Airbus, for instance, one of them. And then last, about our organization, right? We had to organize ourselves, not copying the other agency. We had to give something structured to our own contest. Then I think things work out pretty well, because just in 10 years we went for a non-spacefaring nation to be today one of the largest on the continent. As we speak, fast forward, we have successful launched ANGOSAT 2 on October 12, 2022, sorry. And today, you won't believe we are connecting around 400,000 Angolans. They were never connected to the internet. We are now expanding this experience to Zambia. We're expanding this experience to South Africa, and we want to be able to do for the whole continent of Africa. Because I still continue saying that if we don't connect these 60% of Africans out there that are not connected, I mean, we won't get much done in terms of all these brilliant policies that we're trying to implement. And more, on the other venue, the government says, Zolana, how can we use some of existing space technologies to support the sustainable development goals of the country? As we speak, unfortunately, Africa is still the continent that is lagging behind with the very important sustainable development goals, for instance, ending poverty and minimize hunger, right? Is really terrible. And I'll give some examples. I like to talk to people, just very quick examples. You won't believe, but if we can have just a high resolution satellite imagery that some leading space agencies out there they have, we can save people's life in Africa. How? As you know, today, drought is one of the biggest issues that threatens food insecurity in the continent. And if you can just take a picture of a location with a water source and be able to inform somebody in the village that you can walk 10 kilometers in this direction, that direction, we might save a life. So those are simple examples that government gave us to achieve. And today we are so proud on what we have accomplished. So just to close up, there were a lot of lessons learned that I don't think we have time yet to do. Just to tell you that this is not easy, actually, because I submitted my resignation in 2017 when we launched our first satellite and was an orbital failure. So also learning space that we need to work smarter, be humble, and work with the ones who know how to do this better than you. Thank you.
Just extraordinary. I mean, I've been following over the last few years since you launched Angosat 2. I mean, what you have been able to achieve and what is possible when you have audacious goals.
Mm-hmm.
You went from zero to providing connectivity across Southern Africa, and you're being humble. You could actually provide it in the Southern Hemisphere. To be honest, that's the power of your telecommunication satellite in 10 years. Really extraordinary. I want to pick up from something that you said about the importance of international cooperation in space. We cannot do it. No one government could do this by themselves. And NASA has a massive international cooperation mandate. So, Karla, can you talk about, what those priorities for NASA is in international cooperation? And with the continued growth of African space ecosystem, can you talk about some of the critical areas of collaboration between the US and Africa in the space sector?
Yeah, so I want to, Zolana said something that was really interesting. I wanted to iterate was about the Artemis Accords. So the Artemis Accords are a follow-on from the Outer Space Treaty from 1967. And ultimately, what the Artemis Accords tries to do is to create a safe space and basically facilitate international cooperation in areas of science exploration and sharing of knowledge in space for peaceful purposes. And so I want to make sure that that's a big deal for the United States of America, is that we create and maintain space as a safe domain for all to explore and enjoy. There are 3 African nations that are a part of the Artemis Accords. Nigeria was first, and then Rwanda, and then, as Zolana mentioned, Angola is the 3rd country. We're working really hard to get South Africa online. In fact, I was recently in South Africa for about a couple of weeks in August, and spent time with SANSA, which is a South African space agency. South Africa, and speaking to the international cooperation, given where Africa is located, where the continent is located, there's many opportunities. There's a lot of undeveloped land for communications, and there's opportunity for economic prosperity. We know, as Zolana said, there are many Africans that are unemployed and don't have necessarily the means that they could support a whole village or a family or housing, clean water, and infrastructure. Space in its commerciality kind of setting provides that opportunity no matter where you live or no matter where you are. And so some of the locations in particular that we're looking at in South Africa for communications for our Artemis program are near villages. And I did tour some of those villages that we do have available people that are ready to work, that don't have jobs, that don't have opportunities. And so we're hoping to be able to basically bring some space prosperity to those villages and opportunities there for education. In fact, Africa, doing some research, it's some of the most highly educated people in the whole world are located in Africa and do not have jobs, which is just a travesty. And so we want to make sure that people have jobs commensurate with their experience in education as well. One of the other big things that we want to do with our international cooperation is what we call ingenuity and inspiration. We want to inspire the next generation to think about what they could do and how they could contribute. Zolana talked about communication and connectivity. We want to make sure that Africa is communicating and connected with the entire world. And by virtue of not having access to communications, like we mentioned, internet, it could be something as simple as, I'll say television. Being able to see what's going on in other parts of the world, to receive news of what's going on in other parts of the world that connects us to one another. The world is becoming smaller and smaller, and we want to make sure that the continent of Africa is right along with the rest of the world with respect to that. Some of the other things that we see is the ability to advance science. Because of Africa's location, some of the agriculture that exists in Africa, the land, the indigenous, I'll say, animals and things that are there that allow us to be able to help the rest of the world prosper by cooperating with Africa. And so what NASA aspires to do through the Artemis Accords is facilitate that cooperation and collaboration and do that in a peaceful means. We do know that there are players out there in the world that would seek to make the space not accessible to others. And in the United States of America, we want to make sure that that never happens. We do not want to restrict that access. And so we're really excited about the energy that is around what we have going on with the Artemis Accords. We know that there are European space agencies, Canadian, and some in South America, that will look to be cooperating with Africa and with some of the countries on the continent. And that cooperation will build what we believe a peaceful world for all, because there are many conflicts across the world that we want to potentially put to bed. And there's nothing like when you work with someone from another country or that speaks another language, and you start to realize you have many more things in common than what you have that are different. And that then breeds that ability to work together and have a more peaceful planet. Thanks.
I always say space is the language of peace. It's the place where we can come together with common goals and a common good, to support, humanity and improving the quality of our lives here on Earth. So thank you so much, Karla. Zolana, how have U.S.-Africa partnerships in space science evolved over the years? And what future developments can we expect?
Camille, a great question. Once again, Karla, congratulations for this amazing work on pushing more African countries to join the Artemis Accords. It's extremely important. And Camille, I think we spent a lot of time discussing about the language of space. I think it's one of our favorite topics. I think that it cannot be a partnership if you don't talk the same language. I'm not talking about languages, English or French. I'm talking about sharing the same values, understanding exactly what each other is trying to talk and the message you want to send. And unfortunately, my honest opinion, I've been sharing this with a lot of folks in our industry, is that we don't talk the same language. We think we do. I'll give an example. Unfortunately, Africa, and Karla said, as one of the most brilliant guys, but at the same time, majority of that, there are very challenges with education, challenges with some, how can I say, some customs that are important if you want to engage efficiently on partnership in space. Space is already complicated. So you don't have that some of these tools to engage in equal level. Sometimes one will pretending that we're talking about orange, but that is not orange, but it's a banana. So I think one of the first thing we need to solve is to see how, if we can have more Africans studying in US institutions. This is key, right? Because if we don't do that, let's give an example. If you see China, Russia, what they've done, most of African countries, if you go there, 90% of the decision maker, they study in Russia and China. That is not an accident, right? So if you look today in the space industry, how many Africans have studied in US, it's very residual, right? So meaning we cannot overlook that. We have really to solve this problem quick enough so that we can, in my opinion, then have more efficient partnership with US and Africa. However, the good news that we have been seeing in the last year is very good result. Things are changing dramatically. I'll just give an example, a practical example of what we are doing with US with the research in space. This is where we can start with the top US institutions, for instance. In 2018, we were hit one of the biggest drought in the Southern African hemisphere. And the government asked me, says, Zolana, please find what is the best guy out there who can help us designing a tool that can help us fighting drought, especially for decision-making in terms of policy, how we fight drought, because we've been fighting drought in a very random manner, not sustainable, right? So, and I was fortunate to find a team in MIT, and they went to Angola, and we start designing a drought support system for the Angolan government since 2019. And by the way, funded by NASA. I'm just giving an example that is possible once you as I said before, talk the same language, then everything flows. NASA decided to fund for $500,000 this research project. We are so excited because we are finalizing the tools, one of unique of its kind. And we, by the way, we have published several papers. I'll be willing to share if you want, that will allow today the government of Angola to be able to take decision on fighting drought in a more assertive way. Just giving an example, when you have a drought, sometimes the government will go and build an infrastructure like a dam, but sometimes it's not needed. Sometimes what you need is just to identify the density population that area, the socioeconomic vulnerability of that people, and sometimes just need to send a truck of water, and it will solve that problem in the community. So, and what we did, once again, in terms of the partnership, Camille, we are using the SMAP satellite from NASA, who can measure moisture data permanently in the ground, one of the few in the world, right? Can you see the power of partnership here? A third world country almost now really collaborating with the MIT and be funded by NASA to build one of the most powerful tools be out there to help governments in Africa for decision making on policy how to fight drought. This is the type of examples we need to multiply. That's why I went back to say, but if you want to reach this stage and much faster, we need to solve the common language. So lastly is really about what we see, for instance, with the Artemis Accord today, right? Today we are tapping on space exploration because we understood if we don't protect the planets, we cannot protect the Earth. I always say that we need to have sustainability space to have on Earth as well. I know our problems are different, hunger and poverty are our priorities, but we need to follow this train through so that we have a combined force. So as overall, Camille, I'm really excited for the last steps that we have seen in U.S. partnership collaboration, but the common language first needs to be there. Thank you.
No, that's fantastic, Zolana. Up to this
Camille,
point,
we're gonna need to get into some questions and answers. This is dynamic.
okay.
Can I?
This is may I? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, okay. So this is for Karla. Karla, listen. You know the president Biden is, I guess, if things have changed, on his way to Angola, right?
Yes.
And that's for the Libido project. Now, is there any relationship between space and the Libido project, and where's the opportunity? Now, let me say, because this is going to be, I'm turning the mic back over to Camille. The HBCU community, and we're making a commitment here as engineered from yesterday. And oh my gosh, I have to get you the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, Dr. Penny Brown's speech. Okay.
Okay, I'd love to see that.
This is whole of government, and now targeting a continent that, for all reasons, are going to be so important that we have our HBCUs engaged.
Yes.
Right? Like never before.
Absolutely.
We have to have our students in the classrooms understand the continent and the capabilities that are needed, the competencies, and Zolana spoke to it most clearly and vividly. So I'm excited about this. You've affirmed that not only the president's going to Angola and the Libido project. Please answer, if you can, the association as you see it from an economic development standpoint, and I guess it's even a societal some correction in some instances between the Libido project and space.
So first, I'm not in what I do for a living is not public policy making. I execute public policy, so I'm not going to be able to get into the details of the Libido project. But what I can talk to is this particular administration is committed to looking at underrepresented populations. And so those could be HBCUs. And I am a proud HBCU graduate from Hampton University. So
Howard University.
Yeah. I'm at the other HU, Hampton University, but that's okay.
Hampton University. Yeah. Howard's homecoming this weekend, and you guys got
Absolutely. So anyway, so we digress. But what I will say is this particular administration is committed to underrepresented groups being brought into the forefront, and the activity that we have, be it international activity, be it science, technology, STEM careers, STEM jobs, but basically it's the sharing of prosperity for all. So a lot of the things that you just spoke about, Keith, are about ensuring this economic prosperity across, I will say, the globe, right, for underrepresented groups. And so as we look at the continent of Africa, and I have to say, I do feel in some ways, I wish I had known more sooner. I've been in the business. I didn't go into this for almost 34 years, be it either in missile defense or space, pretty much all of my career, but on the business side of the house, not as an engineer or scientist. There's so many things that I could have been involved in earlier. I'm just grateful that I'm involved in now to push this cooperation, collaboration, because what you see are really good jobs, whether you're in the continent of Africa, whether you're in an HBCU, you're in an inner city and an urban environment, a rural environment, but people that don't have access to, I'll call it, prosperity. And we need to make sure that that's available for all. So there are a number of initiatives with respect to contracting and procurement where we want to spend more money with HBCUs. We want to help build infrastructure there. That same infrastructure building and investment, I prefer to use the term investment, we want to do in the continent of Africa. And where we can have, you mentioned partnerships earlier, Keith, that could be the word of the week, right? Partnerships between the HBCUs and the continent or countries in the continent of Africa. There's no better, more natural collaboration that would take place. In my mind, and I don't know who's all on the call, but I'm just going to say this, it might be a little challenging. The worst thing that could happen to us as American citizens is that we have European-based American citizens of European culture monopolize on the opportunity to collaborate with African nations. I'll just speak to myself personally. This is last in August. That's the first time I went to the continent of Africa. The feeling that I had being on the continent, I cannot explain. I'm committed to try to go back more and do more for the continent. I have a lot of, I'll say, resources as far as knowledge and knowing people that I feel like I could contribute. And we're awakening a group of, I would say, African Americans that can contribute and work. What I was a little bit surprised was how many people of European descent that were there, but I didn't see African Americans there. And so I'm also involved in, I have a sorority, historically black sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha, and I know Camille is in another sorority where they're actually also looking at the same thing. So we're at a really interesting place as far as what I would call an inflection point on the things that we can do as a nation in the United States of America to assist Africa into sharing in some of this prosperity. I think a question you were going to talk about, Alleyne, it dovetails nicely, but it talks about with respect to coming with private industry and private industry making investments, or what cooperation do we see private industry? And the last thing I would hate to see, one of the reasons why I want to be involved is I want American private industry to make investments in the continent, but I don't want them to just make investments and leave. The investments that they make in the continent have to be long-standing, generational, legacy, like teaching for people to start businesses, for people to be able to like teach people to fish, as opposed to providing, I'll say, the fish to eat. And there's this space economy is going to be huge. We're really on the cusp of what could be transformational as a society. And I would love nothing more to be involved in the continent of Africa, to be on the forefront of the receipt of that transformational way of doing business. And it's just so exciting to see. And talking to Africans and seeing the excitement that they have when I say I'm from NASA, or we start to talk about the science, we start to talk about the missions, and you can just see the light and the ingenuity and the ideas that might come about. And I just want to be a part of that. I'm so excited to be at NASA at this time in my career and where we are with our space economy on the business side of the house, to be able to help promulgate some of that knowledge.
One of the reasons and thank you, Karla, for that. That was so profound. One of the reasons I retired early from NASA to start my company was for exactly what you said. There's so much potential. There's so much excitement in the global space ecosystem, but specifically on the continent of Africa. And how do we do more, both private and public sector, to engage, to support, to expand space investments on the continent? I'm telling you, I was in Angola earlier this year at the New Space Africa Conference, the 3rd annual. And of the 55 countries, there were at least 35 present. African countries present there, ready and excited to engage, to talk about how they could build capacity in space to improve life in their country. And so there's such an opportunity there for us. And I will close with this. The last question, I want to follow up with Keith's question on the libido corridor, Zolana. What is it? Describe what that is to the audience and what the opportunities there are for in space investments and bringing space solutions to that project.
Wonderful, Camille. Kate, I'll be mad with you because I think we just got us started, all excited. I think we'll have to figure out something else in the future. So
this is how we do it.
Absolutely.
So just quick facts. The space economy right now is booming. We predict in 2026 for Africa will be $22 billion. And very quickly, where did this money go? Most to European companies, what Karla said, very right. And the HBU communities and African Americans who are present are the closest one to do the space language with Africa countries, right? And going to your question, Camille, is really Lobito Corridor is one of the biggest projects U.S. has ever invested in Africa for the past years. It's not by accident. We have, for the past 6 months, 3 top officials in Angola. We're talking about Secretary Floyd of Defense. We had Secretary Blinken, and we are about to have President Biden. He just changed the trip now. The White House announced publicly that now it's changed for the first week of December. He's still coming. And let's look at it. We are talking about 55 countries in Africa, and they chose Angola for a reason. So the Lobito Corridor, the strategy is really to connect DRC Congo, Zambia, and Angola all the way to the coast, meaning that it's creating all infrastructure that connects the south of Angola to the coast so that we can increase economic transaction more efficient between the U.S. and that region, right? And if you see that passes through the middle of almost of the southern part, means that then you can connect the rest of the continent much easier. And this is not only be shared by U.S. alone. It's important to know that the G7, right, which is shared right by Italy, are on the forefront. That is a united front. It's not just the U.S. Just to see how the U.S. and the main allies say, hey, listen, this is where we're going to invest. So meaning if we need to look for something as this SBU community and what we're talking here, what Karla has resonated and what Camille has been saying so excited, we all need to pay attention to this, to see how we can take, listen guys, Camille knows I'm very pragmatic. I'm tired of not seeing a brilliant African Americans not out there being in charge of things. Why? Why are you not doing that? So, I mean, we need to go together, and take a piece of this chunk, a piece of this money. For the sake of time, I don't know if I can go to details, but, I'm ready, whatever is needed, me and Camille, we can facilitate here, Kate, Karla, and all community, how we can put something together more specific to get part of the chunk of this money and position ourselves in this Lobito corridor. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Infrastructure investment by the U.S.
Absolutely.
on the continent.
Yes.
We cannot be left behind as African Americans. We cannot.
Ladies and gentlemen, I do, it's just so important for you all to understand and know, or know and understand, that the Minority Business Development Agency in December of 2023 signed an MOU with NASA.
Mhm.
We have a codified constitutional foundational roadmap, an agreement,
Right.
consensus to ensure that there's equity that takes place like never before because of that association. So I think, Karla, you would agree that we've certainly hit upon an area of very targeted, uniquely so
Absolutely.
opportunity. And I look forward to the continuation. And listen, we couldn't be more happy to have Arusha Space as a FPC client. That name in itself, Arusha. Arusha.
Tanzania. He who flies to the sky.
And located in Houston, where we're trying to get our client, Kata Energy, back, who's in Houston. So we are, with our 144 centers, so well equipped, poised, and positioned. Karla, are you going to be in Atlanta for Midweek?
I may be able to. I kind of need to know these events so I can get them on the calendar.
Okay.
And and I was also, as Zolana was talking, I was thinking about MBDA, I was thinking about SBA, I was thinking about our Office of Small Business Programs. Wouldn't it be great to host an event there?
Yes,
in
absolutely.
Angola, and try to do some matchmaking on another level? We do a lot of stateside matchmaking, but I'm thinking about lots of opportunity that would exist. And then if we could introduce some HBCUs or something, it could be something pretty noteworthy.
No question.
But love to iterate with you or Camille on that, and Zolana in the future. I'd love to participate in something like that.
Yeah, we look forward to it. Let's speak it into existence. It's done. Okay. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, this is your moment in time. Remember, whatever business you have, does it align with getting a rocket ship to the moon from Earth? And so many other things that you've heard today that are in the supply chain of space. Fascinating. Use this opportunity to put your question in the chat if you have any. This is complex. This is, and we need to bring the complex down to a more simplified version so that we can expand the base. And so I'm happy that you're part of this conversation.
Keith, I'd like to ask a question. This is a simple question. You just brought up breaking it down. Question to the panel. You meet a 14-year-old kid on the corner in Harlem on 125th Street. How do you offer this kid or explain to them about space to where they don't think they're out of the box immediately, because everybody equates astronauts to space, which is math, science, and everything else? How can you introduce, you brought up the space economy, that's a great, how do you tell this kid that? Because let's keep saying, now we build the pipeline. How do we build the pipeline to space starting at 13, 12, and 11? Because right now, if you talk to a 12-year-old kid and you say NASA, they're like, oh, I'm not smart enough to even talk about space. So we have to break it down in terms to where they realize that there are opportunities, not only flying into space, but outside of space, bringing that rocket to life. So I'd like to hear your response on that. I'm 15. Tell me why I should get into space.
Who wants to start? I mean,
Camille, I don't know.
I do this besides running my company full time. I travel around the world empowering and inspiring young people. Mm-hmm. And I was that little brown girl who grew up in the
Hey, can you hear me?
The Caribbean.
Good morning. How are you today?
In the Caribbean Sea.
Please turn your mic off if you're not.
Probably.
Please turn your mic off.
I'll take care of that.
All right.
Go ahead.
Who grew up in the dot in the Caribbean Sea, who, loved math and science, who loved dreaming about the stars, and set my mind to studying this and making it a career. So first thing, you have to have big dreams. No dream is small enough. So at 15, you are starting to think about, what do I want to do with my life? And if space is and science is something that you're interested in, I would say, are you focused in school? Are you doing well? Are you surrounding yourself with people who can help you be successful? Because that is where it starts. And doing math and science really well, right? And then believing in yourself, working hard, and continuing to pursue what it is you love. And that's my message to young people. You could do it. If I could do it, and I came from a little dot.
Yeah. Some of the things we talk about,
Yeah.
just thinking about, somebody in an urban community. But if you go to, like, I'll say motion pictures, where you think about like Transformers or Black Panther or Superman, and you're like, do you like flight, superhuman powers? You can go to the stars, the moon, NASA has a place for you, kind of a thing. And everybody doesn't have to be an engineer or scientist. There's technical areas and technicians. There's researchers, people in labs that are studying things. There's people like me that do business deals. Do you have a head for numbers, but you want to negotiate a deal? Do you like fact finding, problem solving? Are you inquisitive? Just to kind of bring it down to maybe a little bit lower level, because everybody doesn't. I like explosions, to be quite honest with you, Camille. For whatever reason, I've always been fascinated by explosions, but I was not particularly good in math and science. But I could talk, and I could write, and you need people that can do those things to persuade others. And so the point is, what is your superpower? Kind of, what are you particularly good at? And no matter what you're good at, I will tell you, Melvin, that there's a place at NASA for you.
Yep.
And
Yes.
that's the message that I try to tell folks.
Okay.
Yes, and in a few seconds, Melvin, if you just sharing my experience, when I was 17 in Angola, we were still at war that time. If I tell you I was selling on the market street, open markets, I don't know if you'll believe it by then, right? And what took me to be here was really the stamina on how do you put food on the table for your family, right? Sometimes we tell the story wrong. Sometimes we want to take our kids, our young guys, hey, going to the moon and things like that. Let's talk basics, right?
Exactly.
How can you bring food to your table? If you say, hey, you can feed your mom, your brothers, if you focus on space, I think there is much more power, because if you tell him, hey, you want to be going to the moon, he won't believe that.
Yes.
So, and second is the mentorship, right? Melvin, believe me, I got to this stage because I have very great mentors. Unfortunately, I feel like our African American community, we don't focus on mentorships, right? If you see the white and other communities, they are very focused on mentorships. We need to show these guys the way, right? A 10 minutes, 30 minutes conversation, and you will know, run faster. Most of these young kids out there, 14, 12, they are smart, smarter than anybody else. They just don't know the light. Those would be my contributions. Thank you.
I think, Zolana, that to me is key. If I go back to my 22-year-old self, that's how I ended up in the government. They told me they'd start me at $21,000, and in 2 years I was going to make $45,000 a year. And I thought, I had made it in 1990, right? But sometimes it starts with something very basic about, like you said, food on the table, where are you going to live, clothes on your back. And then once you get into it, it takes on a whole nother level. So we can take it down to just basic and get people's attention. I agree 100%.
I'm happy to tell the reflective story of our experience with NASA as an agency. And Zolana, this specifically is for you, because I'd like for you to do the same. I'd like for you to replicate. It was with Open Government TV at North Carolina A&T in 2012 and 2013. We were asked to come in and be media for their STEM diversity program, minority males in STEM. That was the first year. and then STEMs and community of color, STEM and community of color. North Carolina A&T, very intentional. I'll never forget Dean Harvey explaining to me on camera how this phone right here had enough, whatever it has in it, to take a rocket to the moon, right? And that's how the 3-day experience or 2.5-day experience. I saw the young people from the community college, Rockingham Community College, come in uniforms, and they lined up, and they sat right in the center of where the adults were in this 2-day conference. Now that's North Carolina. It has its own history and connection, Karla, you could tell it at any given time, to NASA.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I just think that experience, now they were at 7,500 students, just 7,500 students. Today, about 25,000.
It starts small. Yep, I agree.
Yeah, and so the rigor of finding, and I hope Derek from USDA is still on this call, because I think he's going to be a champion for USDA and the land grants, the 19 that we have. Okay, so just like MBDA centers around the country, where you can get representation from California to Arizona and every state in between, you have a land grant, HBCU, 19 of them, that represent a particular community, urban, rural, and students with skill sets and minds. We just have to penetrate it. No more. I went to Atlanta about a month and 2 months ago with Larry on, and signed our MOU with Cyber Alliance, and I sat at a table and could not believe that I was hearing that the kids and the students in the HBCUs in Atlanta, 4 of them, had really no clue about Africa and the continent. And we have this opportunity to change that. We just had this panel on cybersecurity. Well, listen, every large business in the world is needing cybersecurity talent.
Right.
So is government. So we have to begin to select our battles that we can win. We can win the battle of capturing the minds and hearts of young people who from my friend who committed us to be African in America and come back home.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing, the plug I'll say, I was actually at a conference in Atlanta. It was a procurement conference, but the executive director for United States Space Force is a personal friend of mine. And we were talking about my trip to South Africa and what I had seen. And, they're starting to wake up on United States Space Force to say, hey, there's talent there that we need to work with on the continent. And the other thing that they're realizing, and this is from a national security, U.S. national security perspective, is that we do have some of what we would consider, I won't call names, our adversaries that are already in Africa. They're on the continent.
That's right.
And we would prefer to work with all of that talent in the United States, as opposed to have someone else come in there and get there first. Yep. And so I think what you're seeing in the United States, and it's almost embarrassing to me coming from an HBCU, nobody talked to me about the continent either. Like I can tell you, I've traveled to Europe, Asia, I've been all over the world, literally, but never at 55 years old, for the first time I went to the continent of Africa. Why is that? There's something really wrong with that,
Yeah.
But the reality is we need to make sure that we are passing that information back to the younger generations so that they understand that's a place that we need to go first, not last, if that makes sense.
Oh, it really does.
And North Carolina A&T, that's Dr. Ronald McNair and Carl McNair.
Right.
Absolutely.
So that's the base, the good brothers, the Qs, Rue.
Absolutely.
So that's where it needs to concentrate coming out of there. That should be the beaming light from that institution based upon their alum.
Absolutely.
So I agree.
It's going to take about 6 months or 7 months of planning to get it all, to get the HBCUs and everything else. But let's go to work on that for sure. In closing, Karla, don't be mystified about your spiritual immersion into the continent, because we all have a story. You know, my trek in Africa started in 2003, 5, 7, very actively. I remember the first time flying home, I cried like a baby. I cried like a baby because I had exposure both to the Mandela family, etc. I just seen everything, you know, Swaziland, a royal wedding. I was reading the book, A Long Walk to Freedom. So this is what our students need. Okay.
They need this.
Yes. Okay. Well, Melvin, I think we are up to time, and hopefully he's ready. He says he's ready. And listen, you talk about the European. Please stay on and listen to our sponsor, FRS Consulting out of Paris, and look at the work that this man and his company has done. You'll be fascinated. Thank you so much. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Yeah,
Bye.
take care. Bye. Bye.